Hi everybody, it's Patricia Porter and I'm going to talk to you about example 3 in the set of examples which I gave you in this session. This example 3 is a little bit special. This is not somebody from the assessments that are on Vinaya. This is a mother who came to me directly from a presentation I'd made. I sent her to the Vinaya website to take the test just to see if it was going to be useful for her. I wasn't sure that the issue she told me about, that the Vinaya process was going to work for her, but it is doing, so I thought I would explain this to you. She told me about a boy. Her son is 8 years old and he has difficulties. Let's assume that I know nothing about this child. I do know stuff about this child, but let's assume I don't and just go through this learning, these results and this learning profile, because it's very different from the other two. And you may come across something like this and you need to know how to deal with it. First of all, just to check, it starts off with self-smart at 15, people smart at 9, word smart at 11, just to check that you have got the right example, because they can look very similar and you need to be careful about that. And again, you need to be careful about double checking your scores, and also about putting the right score by the right description. I'm afraid the list I gave you doesn't always match the list of smarts I gave you. It doesn't always match the list of smarts which come up in the detailed results. So you have to be careful about that. I should have mentioned that earlier. So a quick look at the figures. First of all, the figures are mainly double digits in the learning styles and learning smarts. That's interesting and good. But when we look at learning skills, they're very low. Now, that can mean that this parent is marking her son strictly, or it can mean that this child has low skills. But again, it's the pattern we're looking at. There is a good range of numbers in both the styles and the skills, so that gives us something to work with. If they're all, say, number 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, then it's very, very difficult to analyze the results. So looking at the first page, this is going to be an interesting process, analyzing this child's issues. So working on the second page, the child's profile, preferred learning styles, music. It's interesting that this was also example 2's preferred learning style, but this child has music as preferred learning style for a special reason, which I'll come to later. And body, 8-year-old boy, he learns by moving. He needs to move in order to learn. And he likes to learn by himself. Again, there are issues around that, which I'll mention later, okay? His least preferred learning style, he doesn't like learning from people. He doesn't like being around people. And he's not very good at words. He doesn't learn by words, by listening and by reading. So you can see already that his 2 least preferred learning styles are not setting him up well for learning in school, as are his preferred learning styles. They're not setting him up for good learning in school. The music is not well treated. Body, children are expected to sit still for long times in school. That's not going to work for him. And self, the self is okay, but if he has to he's only 8, so he should be interacting with others more. And if he's finding that difficult, that will reduce his learning. Then we look at his learning skills. And the lowest skills in each group, I've only put one low skill for the physical, because it's an outstanding number. It's way lower than the other physical learning skills. So I've put down hearing. This child has a problem with hearing, and that is very significant. Any physical skill, any physical learning skill which is low has tremendous impact on the other 2 types of learning skills. It's almost as though these learning skills were in order of priority. You have to get the physical learning skills right, then the emotional, and then the cognitive will happen. So as well as looking at the pattern of numbers, you have to look at them in some kind of order. So hearing is an issue. That makes me think, let's see if he's had his hearing checked, and if he hasn't, let's ask the parents to do something about that. Because it's hearing, it's not just listening, it's specifically hearing at this stage. He doesn't feel good about his work or about the future. They're both low skills. So he's obviously struggling in some level to learn in school, which is something we've already almost discovered from looking at his learning styles. He's not good at producing work, and maybe he's not good at producing work because he finds attention. He's not very good at attending to what he has to do. That links again, attention links closely with words. Teachers talk a lot. They ask children to read. If he has trouble with that, he's not going to be able to attend well. And if he doesn't attend well, he doesn't know what he has to do, then he's not able to produce good work. His highest skills are interesting. Again, they're not very high, but they're there, okay? He likes to move, and he has good energy. That's good to know. So he's obviously a lively boy. Whether that's good for his teacher or not remains to be seen, okay? Emotional skills, he feels very happy with himself, so that's good. And he actually feels quite happy with his work, which is okay. And he seems to be able to understand and to process. Maybe he understands and processes well what he attends to. But if he doesn't attend to everything, then he's only going to be understanding and processing a part of the work in class that he should be doing. So let's look at the implications now. Okay? His learning styles, his main learning preferences, music and body, are not emphasized in school. Low word preferences and people preferences also make learning difficult in class. So this child is going to struggle to learn in class because he doesn't learn the way he's being taught. Especially because he's young, people preferences are much more important when you're young. Younger children are expected to work in groups much more than older children. So that would be a problem for him. Now, skills, hearing is a problem. Now, hearing is interesting because there's two kinds of hearing loss, and this is in the documents you have on hearing. There's permanent hearing loss, which often is not picked up because children have wonderful ways of hiding the fact they can't hear. Or it's intermittent hearing loss. And intermittent hearing loss occurs when young children are developing language and they have lots of colds and they can't hear well when they have colds, so they miss out on a lot of language development, and they actually develop poor hearing, listening habits because they're used to not hearing. So I added a note here, ask his mother about colds and stuff early in his life and see if he can get his hearing checked. I'll come back to those later. Okay. He has poor attitudes about work and the future, and this may be linked to learning issues in class. Just let me double check that. Yes, those attitudes are significantly lower than the other attitudes he has about himself and about others. Okay, and his production is poor, and that may be linked to his hearing and listening and lack of word skills and poor attention. The production is, of course, the last skill on the set of learning skills, so it can be affected by anything up above it. So production is often a low. The reason, we have to find out why it's low. If only production is low, then you go into the document about production and look at how to help children increase production. But if other skills are low and there are other implications about learning style, you address those first. As I said, production is the last of the skills. So the general comment here for the parent is this child is struggling to learn, could be caused by hearing issues or by hearing issues in the past. Might not be a hearing problem now, but there may have been intermittent hearing loss, which has led to missing out on certain learning and to the development of poor listening habits. So his ears may be functioning now, but he has poor listening habits now. And this is particularly important for this child because he's a musical learner. So he learns through hearing and he learns through movement. So it's really important that we get his hearing checked. And yeah, that's one thing I suggested to his mother. So these are the strategies I would suggest that you start with. First of all, model good listening skills. When the child is talking to you, listen very carefully and ask the parent to repeat if she hasn't understood what the child is saying. Really show that she is listening carefully so that the child can understand what listening carefully looks like and what it means. Model good listening skills. And the super strategy I put down: tell the teacher that this child may have this problem and that you're working on this problem. And when you find some strategies that work at home, you'll tell the teacher what works at home, and she may be able to incorporate them into the classroom teaching. So that is what I would consider as a super strategy, the next level of strategies. And then we go to the skills or learning preference strategies, and I put here, ask the right question. Again, this would work on both listening skills and language skills and on word skills. So by asking the child a question and listening carefully to the answer, you may help the child develop these skills. And I put here, start with one comment in a sentence, go upstairs, move to 2 comments, go upstairs into your bedroom, and eventually 3 comments, go upstairs into your bedroom and find your sweater. Okay, but start with just one thing at a time, and then you check the child has understood that before you go on to the next comment. And praise the process rather than the product. Some self-esteem about his work. This child is obviously trying hard to do work, but is struggling because he doesn't know what to do. So that would be praise the product, the process, not the product. And I also put here, work with a tutor. This child may have missed lots of learning. Work with a tutor who understands the child issues to help increase his word production. So that's the information that I get from an analysis of these results. I want to talk to you a little bit about this child and about his mother because I've done some work with them already, and I will continue to do some more work with them. This child has been designated as being autistic. He's on the autistic spectrum. He went to what's called Sunny Hill Hospital in Vancouver, and he came out with a diagnosis of low-level autism. That means that he is going to be struggling to work with others. That's why his self-smarts are so much higher than his people smarts. This is a child who struggles with emotional relationships and emotional connections to other people. You couldn't see that from the initial results, but when you learn that this child has that diagnosis, then it all seems to fit. Now, at that stage, if you ever get that kind of information from parents, I strongly recommend that you put them in touch with me, because I have worked with these children and I can give them, they need a very special treatment, but we'll come on to that later. And I also, speaking to this mother, she is Spanish speaking, she is from Ecuador, and she told me that this child spent his first year in Ecuador, Spanish speaking, came to the United States for a year, English speaking, although they spoke Spanish at home, when he was 2. This is a critical age of language development. So at age 2, he was getting conflict between Spanish and English. And then his parents came to Vancouver and they had to send him back to Ecuador to be looked after by his grandparents. So for 3 years, he was back to Spanish. When he was 5, he came back to Canada. So he, by all accounts, he understands Spanish, doesn't write it, does speak it, doesn't write it. And as we can see, his English language is not good. Now, at this stage, I begin to question the diagnosis of autism, because this child has obviously had language interference between the two languages. He's been moved around a lot, which may have helped or may have made it difficult for him to create relationships. So maybe his autistic tendencies has been caused by his past history, and maybe it is not so much a fully defined brain function. Maybe the connections in his brain were not the ones that were created at birth, but the ones that were developed during the few years when he's been moved around, and not just moved around physically, moved around between Spanish and English. So I spoke to his parents a little bit about this. I have come up with some strategies for this child, and I have come up, because he's quite picture smart. First of all, yes, he has problems finding his words. He has problems expressing himself. He has problems expressing his thoughts. That's what his parents say. That's their main concern. He can handle one thing. He cannot put 2 or 3 thoughts together in language and in terms of thinking. So he needs help with his word smarts. But he's very music smart, as you can see. That's one of his strongest skills. And his parents say when he's singing or when he's involved in music, he has no problem with his words. He has no problem remembering what he has to sing or remembering what he has to say. That is because the music part of the brain and the word part of the brain are different. So obviously the word part of the brain has not been as well developed as the music part of the brain. That's very interesting. So we can use music to help him develop more words. I'm going to give the parents some ideas about how to do that. He is also body smart. His parents say they realize that if they show him what to do, he gets it much more quickly than if they tell him what to do. And if they give him frequent breaks, it's much better for his learning. Now, this can't always happen in class, but they can make this happen at home. And also, he is picture smart. So what I'm going to give them is what I call a mind map process, where he can put individual thoughts down on this mind map and then link them together to create a series of thoughts. And that will help him bring his individual sentences into some kind of structure that will make a story for when he's writing in school. His parents, that was their main concern. They want him to be able to do that. So I've given you this example as a special example, and as you can look at these numbers and you can work through the implications that I have there. But then when you get on call with the parents, you're suddenly going to learn new stuff. Like this child has been diagnosed autistic, that should ring bells. That he's had 2 different languages, that should ring big bells as well. And at that stage, you're going to have to rethink all these numbers. You're going to have to use those 2 statements as a viewfinder in which to look at these numbers differently. So that's almost a second level of analysis. So if when you're working with parents you come across this kind of situation, you need to contact me. We can talk about it, and I can either support you in going forward or I can suggest other ways of going forward. So I hope that has given you some idea about what to do with the results. This is the last of the videos for this session. Again, please go through it with a fine-tooth comb. See what you think about it. See what you think of my first analysis. See if you agree. See if it would give you enough information to start a conversation with parents when you first contact them by phone. And again, if you don't agree, or if you have a different analysis, get back to me and let me know. I'd be fascinated to see what your thinking was about this. You may have a better understanding of the context that this child is learning in, and that might help you to get a totally different perspective on this child's learning issues. So when you've gone through these 3 examples and you feel happy that you understand the process, I want you to, before you finish this set, before you feel confident in how to analyze these results, and before I feel confident that I have given you enough support, I want you to go into the Vinaya site. I want you to pick up 3 names, maybe 3 different age ranges, and do an analysis of them. I don't need to know the names, you don't need to know the names, but you need to be able to analyze. So complete one of these for 3 different children and get them back to me so I can look at how you have analyzed things. And if you have any questions, add them to that document so I can get back to you and help you with that. Analysis of the diagnostic learning assessment is critically important. There are 2 parts which are critically important to this process. Critically important. Every part is important, but these are critically important. The analysis of the results and the ability to communicate with parents. I'm going to be working on, and you are going to be working on, how to communicate with parents around this process. That is going to start with set 3, the next set of training materials. So please, for now, go through these 3 video examples. Look up some examples on the Vinaya site, do your own work on them, and get them back to me, and we'll see where we go from there. Thank you. Have fun.